ESPN.com describes Joe Petruccio, and I'm quoting here, as our favorite New York sports artist. Heck, our favorite New York artist, period. The New York Times did a one-on-one interview with him. Very favorable. CNBC recognizes him, and again I'm quoting, as one of the best-known celebrity artists in the world. He's a cartoonist. He's the official licensed artist for Elvis Presley's Graceland. Muhammad Ali also. Let's welcome in the uber-talented Joe Petruccio. Joe, are you with us?
Yeah, hey, how you doing, guys? Hey, Mike, hey, Anthony.
Welcome aboard.
Thanks, good to be here.
Joe, thanks for coming on. You know, on the last episode, we had Ira from Staten Island, the super fan, the super jet fan. And in an effort to kind of enhance his appearance, I went over to ESPN.com to look for some jet pictures, etc. And I find this, Darrell Revis cartoon, and I look down and it says Joe Petruccio. I say, hey, I know that guy. Went to high school with him. And I mentioned it on the last episode. So we're going to go over to our next graphic. And Joe, before we get into the diversity of your artistry, we're going to put up a graphic, and here we have you ripping off your shirt, and you have a Met shirt right underneath it, and we're going to talk about your favorite subject when it comes to artwork, the New York Mets. You grew up in Brooklyn, diehard Met fan, Joe, and you have an interesting story where you get your first job, you're working on Madison Avenue, so to speak. They give you a project to work on, and you designed a New York Met uniform. Joe, if you could just walk us through that a little bit. Tell us that story.
Sure, it's kind of cool. So like you said, I've always been a Met fan my whole life. I mean, that's I bleed blue and orange. That's it. And during the '70s, we were in high school. I, on the side, used to try to redesign the Met uniforms because I used to think, look at these new uniforms. The Astros have these stripes on their uniforms with the big stars, and they're fitted uniforms. The Mets look so schlumpy. Maybe if they had nice uniforms, they would play better. Right. So I started sending my drawings to the Mets. And, they would send it back to me like, oh, thanks so much, great idea, thank you. But I would just keep sending them. Now, after a couple of years of that, I stopped doing it and went on to college and then got my first job at a college advertising agency. Then I got lucky enough to be put on the New York Mets account at the advertising agency. So I worked on a couple of Mets campaigns. I worked on the Magic is Back campaign, which is kind of a famous campaign. And while I was working on the Mets, they noticed that I could draw and had a talent for drawing. They said, hey, Joe, would you like to take a shot at designing the Met uniform? Wow. I said, all right, I'll take a shot at it. Little did they know I've taken many shots at it. So I did a few drawings, went up a couple of times, showed them. Finally, we got down to what is known today as the racing stripe uniform.
Well, Joe, as you're saying that, we'll go over to G3, if we will. We just popped it up, Joe. So as you're describing it, our viewers are going to see it.
Okay, so that is the actual drawing that I showed the New York Mets. That's a print from the actual drawing that I presented to the Mets. And so they looked over the picture, and then they called this other person into the room who, at the time, his name was Jim Nagurney, and he had to take a look at the uniform, get his blessing on it. So they called him in, and they said, Jim, this is Joe Petruccio. He designed this uniform. We'd like you to take a look at it. What do you think of it? As he's looking at the picture, he said to me, Joe Petruccio, why does that name sound so familiar to me? And I says, well, about 10 years ago when I was in high school, I used to send you drawings of Met uniforms. He says, you're the guy who used to send me those pictures every week? I says, yeah, that's me.
That's a wild story.
He says, well, I guess you were meant to design this uniform then.
Well, Joe,
they picked the racing stripe uniform.